Hey everyone, thanks so much for joining. You're here today with ClearTech Loop, in the know and on the move. I'm Joe Peterson. I am the Vice President of Cloud and Security for Clarify 360 and the Chief Analyst at ClearTech Research. And I'm here with Mr. John Carse, Field CISO at SquareX. Hi, John.
Hey, Joe. Thanks for having me on your show.
Oh, thanks for being here. Y'all may not know John yet, but you will. John's a very successful three-time CISO with companies like Rakuten, Dyson, and others, and he's got a super long pedigree in security. And in case you're not familiar with the podcast, ClearTech Loop is a focused podcast, and we deliver sharp, real-time insights at the intersection of cybersecurity, cloud, and AI security. So the conversation that we're going to have is part of a series of conversations with IT and security leaders that are navigating a new era of risk and responsibility. And it's not just about protection. We ask what they see on the horizon and how they're preparing for it through a three-question lens. But before we get into the questions, John, take a minute and tell us what you do on a day-to-day basis.
So the Field CISO role is somewhat of a new role for me. So I think I'm still trying to figure it out. Sometimes I talk to people and they think it's a more senior sales engineer kind of role. And in some cases, I definitely deal with technical objections from customers and trying to handle those things. Where I think my position is a little bit different from that is that, having been a CISO, I know what our product is and what it's doing, but I also can understand where it belongs in our customers' cybersecurity strategy. And if I can learn more about what they're doing, I can figure out how best we can integrate with them and their technologies and those kinds of things, and provide them guidance on anything they might want to have. They might have questions about. So day to day, I feel like I am doing a lot of education. I kind of call it evangelism because I definitely think there's a gap in people's understanding of how their defensive technologies work and where the industry is from a cloud perspective and how people use browsers every day. But they have a feeling like, their EDRs and their secure web gateways and everything else is protecting them, but there are gaps. And so I feel like I'm spending a lot of time educating. And, and that includes me doing podcasts and being on podcasts and doing webinars. So that's what I feel like I do on a day-to-day basis. I'm also doing third-party risk management, questionnaires and helping the sales team, answer questions and get better at answering questions. So it's definitely a different role from being a CISO, but it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, I'm glad you're having fun. So again, thanks for spending a little bit of time with us. Let me just jump into the questions here. So the first one, from a CISO's perspective, how should you be thinking about cyber risk in terms of dollars and business impact?
Well, I definitely feel like we should be thinking about cyber risk in directly related to dollars. I think that's probably one of the hardest things that cyber practitioners fail to do is to relate their technical metrics back into what the impact is to the organization. And as a result, I think that creates a lot of fear, uncertainty, and doubt unnecessarily, where people are talking about the numbers that are easy for them to get with respect to vulnerabilities or different kinds of findings on, different reports. And we tend to say like, hey, this is very threatening and such. But if it was as threatening as we said it would be, then we would have a lot more breaches. So the likelihood of a breach would be up, right? And then the impact of those breaches would also be up. And then given that number, we should be able to figure out how many dollars it is, but we tend not to, right? It tends to be from a business perspective. If we talk about the technical metrics, then we're going to see that those technical metrics aren't really turning into dollars of impact. And as a result, we probably need to find a different way, right? So in some ways, I think that where we can, from a security perspective, be aligned more to the business and think about risk with, in terms that the business understands, whether that's market share erosion, that we're losing customers to other competitors because we may not be perceived as a, security conscious or security first kind of company. That probably came from reputational damage if we're showing up in incidents. So those are things that we could do. We could talk about compliance fines. For example, if we don't keep our PCI DSS compliance in place, then our charges for, our transaction fees might go up, right? So there's a number of things that we could be talking about. We talk about confidentiality, integrity, and availability. We don't spend enough time talking about availability and how two things, right? The direct cost of availability to downtime and how that impacts our, revenue numbers, right? But also from recovering from events that, the incident reviews and lessons learned and all those activities that we have to do to put ourselves in a better position with respect to availability also has opportunity costs associated with it. So those are a lot of the numbers that you could start, weaving into your conversations that will, one, let your CFO know that you understand, like, well, hey, what's going on? That technology and cyber actually have a business impact, and trust is good and resilience is good, and it turns into numbers. She's going to appreciate you. That's going to help you with, you getting your head counts and your budgets approved. And talking dollars, not in, FUD.
Yeah, that's so important. And you said it right there so well. Make it in a language that someone that's not in tech understands, right? Make it relevant to them and what they're trying to accomplish, right? Because I'm guilty of it. I know other folks in the industry are. We automatically go into tech mode.
Absolutely. I mean, it's a lot of the folks that are in cyber are technologists, right? And so as a result, we're going to talk about the things that are interesting to us, and and definitely there are real threats out there, and there's a lot of work to do. But I think that we really need to be able to prioritize it in some way, and prioritizing it along with the rest of the business, I think, is just a better approach rather than just buying another tool. Focus on threat informed defense. Be able to measure it. Be able to figure out like what the impacts have been into your organization, and kind of relate that back to something the business cares about, right? And if we can do that, I think that we're going to do a better job of identifying what technologies we should be investing in, what technologies we should be divesting from, and then making sure that we're, and reducing our opportunities for an attacker to get on our networks. That's, a better use of financial dollars too, right? So we have a lot of things that we can do to make it better.
And you kind of answered my second question as we talked through, which was great. You kind of answered my second question about integrating cyber risk into the business's overall financial risk model as we were talking through that. So let me move on to the third question.
Let me say a little bit more about that, because I think that that when you're integrating it, right, we're talking a little about threat informed defense and prioritizations and such, but have a model for it, because there's going to be things that you want to talk to the board or other executives, the executive committees, or whoever about what it is that you're doing. And one of the things that you want to be able to relate this to is something that the business is easy for the business to understand. Mm-hmm. Like, for example, something that might be easy that I used in my past is, how long does it take for me to detect a threat? Am I detecting the threat myself? My organization's detecting it, or is it coming from the outside? So that was one measure that I had in the past, which was how many times do I detect it, or am I being told by the FBI? I want more times where my team is telling me about it before the FBI tells me, post it, right? The second thing is understanding the effectiveness of your tools, right? Understand where they are, from your defensive perspective. That's more for your internal use, right? But something that the business might be able to care about is how long does it take for you to detect that threat? Is it 24 hours? Is it a week? Is it 280 days? Whatever that number is, that's something that the business can understand. That how long does it take for me to detect that someone broken into our house? And, if it's ADT, the monitoring company that monitors my house, right? I want them to find out soon and call the police when it happens. But there's a cost to that, a cost to having something done within an hour and within 24 hours or within a week. And depending on what the risk appetite for the business is, with your understanding of how effective your controls are that you have in place and what gaps you have, you can bring those things together with something that the business understands, that we want to detect things on our own and we want to do it within 24 hours of a breach occurring. If those things are important, then aligning your technology and your investments and your budget to that objective, that SLA, will let the business understand that going from 24 hours to 15 minutes is a completely different technology stack and a completely different rollout model that's going to, maybe be worth it. But now you have a business decision that you can talk about, right? Just focusing on, we want to detect things on our own and we want to do it in this SLA. How much does it cost for me to do it in 24 hours versus 1 day versus 30 days? These are different ways of kind of thinking about how you integrate risk and risk appetite into your budgeting and how well you can perform your cyber duties, I guess.
And that's a great way to do it, because you make a direct, easy to understand correlation between, good, better, and best, right?
Absolutely.
Dollars on it. Good.
People like that.
Yeah.
Good, better, best. I like that. I go the gold plan, the silver plan, the bronze plan, or no plan, right? But but that's it. They they understand gold, silver, bronze. I know, better, best. So
that's great. All right. Well, I got to squeeze in our last question here.
Okay.
How should the CISO be thinking about AI adoption in terms of its use to secure emerging threats? So two sides of the coin, and then from an organizational governance perspective.
Yeah, I think that have a plan, right? I think that my perspective on this is, people are going to use AI, whether you want them to or you don't want them to. And the easiest thing to do is make sure that you have some understanding of what it is that your organization, could possibly be doing with AI, and then provide guidance to the organization on, what are good things to do, right? And that's the easiest thing to do, is just let people know what your intent is as a CISO, right? It's like, yes, we're going to be doing AI. We want to do it smartly. Let's integrate it into our GRC processes. Let's do it just like a business model, like your normal business. You probably have everything that you need from a governance perspective already in place. I think from a guidance perspective, you really just want to line up what guidance is applicable to AI technologies, and then send that out to everyone so that they understand how they get AI into the business, right? And it's, it is using your third-party risk management. It's using your GRC processes. It's using your procurement processes. It's understanding the contracts and everything else. And so that's one part of it. I think the second part of it is understanding, what's your culture like? In some places they might want to use tools to generate images, right? And have people in the images. And then that might be okay for some companies to integrate that into, but there's other companies that ethically, they feel like people are people, and we want to really, not get away from keeping people on the pedestal. Like, it's about people, right? And maybe they won't integrate images of people into their products, like AI generated images into their marketing. And these are ethical or cultural questions that you've got to understand, so that you can start to figure out what kind of products are good and what the features of those products are that align with your business's culture. So some of it is just kind of understanding what that is, and then putting that into some sort of governance structure that allows your organization to kind of identify business use cases, get it through the governance boards, because AI is new to a lot of companies and governing it is new, and you have new regulations in the EU that you've got to worry about. In the States, I think we're in pretty good set of, we don't have people limiting our use of AI today. I think we're looking for that regulations, but those don't really exist today. But we have to somewhat understand what that model is, because there's a lot of multinational corporations that do work in the EU, and they've got to understand the global impact of that. And there's new regulations that are coming out all over the place. So be mindful of that. And you want to make sure your governance structure gets you through that. But at the same time, governance is good. Again, guidance is easy. You probably already have acceptable use policies, procurement policies, et cetera, that you should be providing that guidance through. Make sure your governance models around AI take advantage of your cultural problems, but also make sure that you're getting through the rest of the procurement and other ethical questions that you might have, and then come out of this side with business use cases that you want to do. So that's part of what you need to do. But from a CISO perspective and protecting intellectual property and defending inside of your environment, it's a different problem that you have, right? Whereas you have a number of issues with respect to threats against AI and data, and the availability of data that can be consumed by AI. So I don't want to pick on Microsoft and Microsoft Copilot and SharePoint and OneDrive, but I have not seen a lot of companies that are really good at data labeling and data classifications and making sure that the right that everyone that has access to all that should have access to those files, and having AI make it easier to extract information from it. And then some of the attacks that I've seen with respect to prompt injections that are direct prompt injections or indirect prompt injections makes me a little bit more hesitant to use big LLMs in my unstructured data that's just in SharePoint and OneDrive. So you got to really kind of think about like where your data is, what could be happening with data, who can insert information into your data, whether it's by emails or Teams or in SharePoint or wherever it's coming through. Be mindful of all these attack vectors that are around AI on the data side, but then there's a lot of things that are also occurring with their orchestration frameworks and everything else. But with respect to discovering governance, your governance is easy. It's an easy way to get fear, but the discovery part, how can you use your security tools to understand where AI is being used, and then start to use your security tools to manage the access to those systems. Whether, from my perspective, I think a lot of what's happening today is happening through the browser.
For sure.
And
the browser is the new endpoint, John. It is the new endpoint.
For sure. I mean, I think that folks don't really understand that we've kind of moved out of data centers and out of private offices, and people have remote works, and IT deploys more things through SaaS today than ever, and over 50% of our IT budgets, and this is trillions of dollars that are just going into SaaS products and cloud environments today. And being able to control what's happening in the browser, I think, is a great place to do discovery, and then also make sure that you understand what people are doing in the browser when they're accessing ChatGPT or Claude or whatever. How do you get control of that? And you may want people to use enterprise OpenAI because you have a good agreement with them, and it's going to control and allow you to secure your data and how they're using your prompts and the output of the prompts. But then if you don't want people to use ChatGPT, or you don't want people taking their enterprise data and put it into personal ChatGPT, how do you control that in the browser? Look to SquareX if you want some ideas. But there's also, of course, data leakage prevention problems, both from the data that's coming in from your systems that your AI is generating, but a lot of times, and this is the big threat that I always felt as a CISO, practicing CISO, was how are people taking our confidential data and sticking them into, Chat GPT as the easy example. How are you preventing that?
That's
And
right.
and those again are things that you want to find the technology solutions to put in place, and of course, understanding what that is and being able to look at the stuff in real time. Are you seeing different kinds of threat? Can you identify a threat that's happening in the browser against a generative AI, or are you seeing answers come back that you're not expecting? How do you do that? And a lot of the stacks that are available from AWS, Azure, Google have the ability to look for bad prompts and bad answers. So how do you integrate that into your technology stack? I think that's a good thing to do. And then the big thing that's happening today is also like just extensions. We're putting more and more browser extensions that have AI. I think I forgot the term, but I think like 30% of the extensions in Google Chrome Web Store now say something about AI. And I don't know if that's true that they all have AI integrated into it. But if you start looking at reports, it's like how are those being protected, right? And if I can, do an indirect prompt injection by sending something in Gmail to you, and then that's being used by the extension that's doing AI, and it's now exfiltrating my data because of whatever. How is that? How are you protecting yourselves from all of these AI agents? I think that's something to think about. And then, of course, auditing and remediation, right? Just how is it that you're going to audit this? How are you going to look for your models that are drifting from what you intended them to do? And how do you, kind of make sure that your defensive capabilities that you have in place are working, right? So lots to do on AI, but I really think it comes down to discovery, guidance, auditing, and remediation of your controls, real-time monitoring, and browser security from my perspective, both from a malicious extensions, OAuth scopes, DLP in the browser, so that when you're copying and pasting things around, and then yes, keeping people out of places you don't want them to be, right? So meaning prevent them from going to personal Chat GPT if that's not inside the scope of your company.
Well, I mean, really, really good, comprehensive intelligence and guidance from you guys at 3-time CISO. So John knows what he's talking about. So thank you all. Thank you, John, first for taking your time to visit. And thank you, everyone, for taking the time to join today. And we'll see you again.
Thanks, Joe. Thanks, everyone.